Hi everybody, Josh here with Northern Frogger, and here today with a build video. There's actually going to be 3 builds in this video. I'm going to show you how I did this one here, which is a 12 by 12 by 18 Exoterra. It's currently housing my Fantastica Nominals, and this one, same size tank, which is currently housing my Fantastica Monte Cristos. And this one here, which is a 20-gallon aquarium that is housing a pair of Azurius. And if you've been following the channel for a while, you might remember this Viv that I did a video on previously. This was a really basic build where I just kind of put silicone directly onto the sides and stuck the substrate straight to it. Whereas the 3 builds you'll see in this video I did with the spray foam background method, and then covered that with the substrate. And I don't think I've done a spray foam build video on this channel yet, even though I do have quite a few Vivariums with the spray foam. I think just most of those were built before I started this channel. So without further ado, let's get into the build. These are 2 new Vivariums that are pretty much ready to get foamed here. They both had waterfalls in them at one point. This one just had the regular foam Exoterra background that I kind of installed a pump behind, and had kind of a waterfall trickling down the back there for a while, but it eventually stopped working and I couldn't really get to the pump without tearing the whole thing apart. So I moved some frogs out of here and kind of tore it down, cleaned it up a bit, and I'm going to put a new foam background in here. Same thing with this one. I bought this one assembled like this, or I bought this one pre-built with frogs in it, and it had a waterfall in it too, kind of in this back corner. But it was kind of all foamed in. It took up quite a bit of that corner, and that waterfall didn't really work either, and also couldn't really get to the pump to service it. So moved some frogs out of here and cut away the part that had the waterfall there and some of the other background and some of the stuff on this side to kind of redo it a bit. I left some of the foam in there. I'm just going to add some more and some more cork bark. This is the foam that I'll be using to do it. This pond and stone, great stuff. I think it's pretty much the same as the regular stuff, except this is black, which makes it a little bit easier to hide. But I've used that regular yellow stuff before too. It works fine, but I use this stuff if I can find it. It's not always available, and it's a little bit more expensive. I think it's $1 or something more per can. But I'm hoping this one can, I do have some extra cans if I run out, but hopefully this can will do both of these. I try to plan it to use a whole can at a time if I'm going to do it, because it's pretty tough to come back and use them later because the stuff hardens in the tube, and it's pretty hard to get the can going again. So I usually treat this foam as kind of a one-time use. So I try to use it all and plan multiple builds at the same time. So I'm going to move one of these out of the way. I'd like to lay it down on its back to make the foam stick a little easier. So I'm going to throw the camera on the tripod and start doing that. Alright, so I've kind of roughly laid these pieces out where I want them. Just basically going to pull them out now. So now I'm just going to cover the back with the foam and then kind of lay the cork bark into it. I'm going to try to build up this corner a little bit more because I want this one to actually kind of sit off of the back, kind of into the wall there. So the first thing I usually do is just cover the whole back in a good layer, and then kind of come along and fill in the corners or build up any high spots where I want them. And then I just kind of come in and place the wood pieces where I want them. And then I come back with the spray foam and fill in behind them a little bit, try and fill in any gaps, and then build up any more spots to where I want them. And I like to go a little bit more than I think I'm going to need, because you can always carve it down afterwards. But I think that's going to be good for this one. I'm going to put it to the side and lay out the next one. Now this one originally came with a couple of these pieces. I don't know if this is manzanita or something like that, but I think I'm going to try to reincorporate those into the new design. So this was just me kind of playing around with some different placements, trying to figure out where I wanted to put the wood exactly, find places that look good. I sped this up and cut out quite a bit of it because I did spend a good 10-15 minutes here just trying to get them where I wanted them. But yeah, I just kind of came up with something that I was happy with there. Kind of move them to the side somewhere where you can kind of remember where you had them. And then kind of same thing, just started covering the back up and then building it up in a few spots. And I'm not going to show you every step on every vivarium just because this video would take too long if I did that. But you will get to see each step at least once on one vivarium. So then just kind of the same thing, put the wood in, filled in the back a little bit more. It was starting to go really slow here as the can was losing pressure. But you can actually go for quite a while with it just kind of trickling out of there. And then I built up this ledge on the side a little bit, just with a little bit of foam just to give a little more climbing area. So that's pretty much it for this step. Now I just let them dry overnight and come back to carve them out the next day. Alright, so this is the next day. This foam is pretty set up here. So pretty happy with how these are looking right now. Got a little bit of carving to do on the foam. This top is a little bit over the edge here, so I have to trim that down. Probably trim some of this out. And then I'm gonna do a little bit more. I think I'm gonna attach this piece into the side here somewhere. And then on this one, I'm gonna have to scrape some of this away on both sides where there used to be pieces attached there, and build a couple more pieces out onto the sides there somewhere. Alright, so you can see I've carved out a little bit here. I didn't really have to do much, I just took off a couple of the high spots. And probably the best way to carve that is with like a serrated knife, like a steak knife or something like that. But I find it does make quite a bit of a mess when you do it that way with the little foam going everywhere. So I usually just use like a really sharp pocket knife. But what you're seeing here is this can I was trying to use was actually a dud. It was a brand new can, bought at the same time as the other ones, but just couldn't get anything to come out of it. Luckily I did have another can, so I was able to keep going. But you can see I've carved off some of the substrate on the side there, but there is still some silicone there, which isn't going to hurt anything. That actually kind of helps the foam stick. Sticks better to the silicone than the glass. But yeah, I just wanted a little more structure on the sides there, so I just grabbed a couple more pieces of cork bark and attached those down to the sides with foam. And then I started on the next one. I was doing most of the work on this side, so I had this one on the side instead of the back, but I just filled in a bunch of foam to stick these wood pieces there, and built the foam up on the side a little bit more just to give it a little more structure there too. And then I had originally planned to do these in one go so I could use one can, but because I had to do that little bit extra there, it only used a little bit of a can, so I didn't want to waste the rest of it. So I had an empty 20-gallon aquarium sitting around, so I decided why not do that one too. So same thing here, just kind of laid it out across the background. Set the wood into it, filled in some of the gaps, and you'll notice I never go all the way down to the bottom on these. I leave a good 4 inches or so just to allow for the drainage layer and the substrate layer at the bottom. Alright, so it's a couple days later. This foam's all dry here and ready for the next step. I'm pretty happy with how they're looking right now. Got this one here. I got this one over here, using a little bit of different wood. So I like how this one's looking, and then to use up the rest of that can, I also have this 20-gallon aquarium. So I foamed some cork bark into the background on this one as well. But yeah, pretty happy with all these so far. A little bit more carving to do, pretty minimal though. And then I can grab the silicone and start covering it up and finishing off the background here. Alright, so for this step I'm just using clear silicone. It's an aquarium safe silicone that I get from Home Hardware, and I just kind of squirt a good thick layer on, try to cover a lot of the background there. And then I come along with my fingers and just kind of spread it out evenly. Try to push it into all the nooks and crannies and make sure all of that spray foam is totally covered in a good layer of silicone. You want a nice thick layer for the substrate to adhere to and to be able to kind of sink into and get some good contact there. I also spread a little bit onto the glass there, you can see, and I'll put some substrate directly onto there. So then it's just a matter of dumping the substrate onto it, and it's just a mixture of coconut husk, coconut fiber, and sphagnum moss. And I just kind of sprinkle a good thick layer over the whole thing, and then kind of just go along and press it into the silicone, just making sure that it's all covered. And if there's any extra there, you can just shake it off after. So I usually just use a ton of it and push it in there good, and then let it dry. So to install the glass tops on these, I just run a bead of silicone around the edge and basically drop the glass in and push it into place. When I get it cut, I make sure to leave it a little bit short. Just cut a piece of screen to size, run a bead of silicone around, and then just kind of drop the screen in, press it into the silicone, and then I like to put a piece of tape across the back just because it kind of flattens it out and makes the finish look a little bit nicer at the end. Alright, so here's the 20 gallon, all the background's all done here. Tipped it up and just kind of lightly brushed all the loose stuff off, fell into the bottom and clean that up. I can go ahead and start putting the soil, or the drainage layer and the soil in this one. Alright, got the drainage layer in there. It's just the expanded clay balls. I prefer to use these. You can also use the egg crate to make a false bottom. That works fine as well. You just want something to allow the soil to drain of excess moisture. And then I've also got a barrier layer in here, which is just some generic fiberglass window screen that I buy off a big roll from Home Hardware. Just cut to size and placed on top. So now it's ready for the soil. Alright, so this is the part where I would like to show you actually putting the soil in, but somehow I apparently forgot to hit record during that whole step, so I missed it. If you do want to see that step, I do show it in a couple of my other build videos, which I'll link below. But for this video, I'll just mention a couple of the important points here. So the substrate mixture I usually use is mostly made up of like a ground coconut fiber, like plantation soil or eco earth, as well as the coconut husk, which is the bigger chunks, and some sphagnum moss. I also usually use some orchid bark, which is actually bark from a fir tree. It's just called orchid bark because it makes a good substrate for growing orchids. And I also usually mix in a little bit of sand and some potting soil. You do have to be a little bit careful with potting soil, not to use too much because it can kind of get a little too soggy and muddy in there. Some people say not to use it at all, but I find it adds a little bit of nutrients to the soil that you don't really get from the coconut products, which really helps to kickstart the plants, I find. So just be careful not to overdo it, and definitely make sure you find one that doesn't have any added fertilizers or anything like that. The main things you're looking for in a vivarium substrate is something that's going to hold moisture, but also not become saturated and soggy. You want it to still be able to drain. So that's kind of the idea behind the different ingredients there. The coconut products really help to hold that moisture in, and then just having the different size particles between the coconut husk and the fiber and the sand and the orchid bark just really helps create air pockets and space in that soil to where it's not going to get compacted or soggy or muddy or anything like that. And I don't really have an exact recipe or anything to share with you guys just because I don't really use one myself. I just kind of go by feel, I guess. Start mixing up the ingredients and add more or less of something, just kind of depending on how it feels, and I kind of test it by kind of soaking it down a bit and taking a handful of it and squeezing it. It should kind of hold on to the moisture, but when you release it, it should kind of fluff back up again. You don't want it to be to stay tight and compact after you release it. And the other thing is that usually every time I do a new mix, it's a little bit different just because I'm usually experimenting with adding things or taking out things that I feel didn't work very good, or trying to substitute things for each other. But I do encourage you guys to go do some further reading, maybe on some Dart Frog forums, just because those are going to have some pretty good discussions that go into a lot of depth on vivarium soils and how to build a good vivarium soil. They're going to go into a lot more detail than I can cover in this video. Alright, so now we got the substrate in there, and it's capped off with a little bit of sphagnum moss and some leaf litter. And I like to cap the substrate off with something just because the substrate tends to stick to the frogs a bit, and then they kind of track it over the glass and onto the plants and stuff like that. So if you cap it with a little bit of moss and leaves, kind of helps keep the vivarium cleaner and looking nicer longer. So that's done. I'm going to spray it down with the Mr. Good here and then plant it up a bit. Alright, got some plants planted in here, a little bit of moss stuck in the background. I'm probably going to plant it a little bit heavier than this, but I think this is all I'm going to do for tonight. I'll probably end up putting some more cork bark or something just to make a couple, just to add a little bit more climbing area, probably like propped up against the back, just to kind of give them some ramps in there. And yeah, throw a few more plants in there eventually, but this one is almost good to go. Alright, so this is a few days later. These are pretty much good to go. Got the glass installed, got the mist nozzles installed, got them all planted up. And here's the other one. I think they both turned out really well. And I'm probably going to come in and throw some more plants. I got to put some Brahms in here eventually. I think we're going to do the Monte Cristos in this vivarium, and the Nominals in this one. I'm going to get them both moved into their new homes here, and hopefully they enjoy them. Alright, so the final step here is to just release the frogs into the vivariums. So just sit back and enjoy some of this frog footage. So that's going to do it for this video. Thanks so much for watching. Hit that like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and until next time, happy frogging.